Away from Election Day here in Eastern Iowa. For some, looking at that ballot sheet, it might as well be in a different language, because it actually is. KWWL's Emily Moss reports on what one nonprofit is doing to change that.
Some of you might be looking behind me and getting confused, possibly even frustrated, trying to figure out what it says. Imagine if that's how you felt every time an election comes around. Would you bother voting? That's the basis of the current lawsuit against Iowa's English-only law.
That language is not something to judge whether or not a person has the right to vote.
Iowa's English-only law was introduced in 2002, requiring all official documents to be published in English. In 2008, an injunction added voting materials to that list.
Clearly, this infringes upon the 14th and 15th Amendment to not be able to have information translated in other languages, as it had been prior to 2008.
The League of Latin American Citizens in Iowa is now suing the state.
Language has never been used to determine whether or not a person is a citizen. This is not who we are as a state.
Current Secretary of State Paul Pate is listed as a defendant on the suit. His office sent the following statement citing the injunction.
Unfortunately, the Secretary of State at the time did not object, did not go back to court to argue that it did infringe upon the rights of citizens here in Iowa.
Federal voting law requires volunteers at booths to help those who need it, but without government assistance, LULAC says it's near impossible to guarantee a volunteer translator at each poll site.
You may be able to speak English, but reading the language is more complicated. This is a constitutional issue that goes beyond what volunteer services can do.
Emily Moss, News 7, KWWL.
All right, Emily, thank you. LULAC is also suing the state over what it calls the recent voter suppression laws that went into effect this year. Here's a reminder of some of those changes. Polls will close at 8 p.m. on election night instead of 9. Employers must allow employees 2 hours to vote if they do not have that time off during poll hours. Absentee ballots must be received by the auditor by 8 p.m.